The Mariners are on a 4-game winning streak against both the Rays and the San Francisco Giants. They took the series with the Rays. They already have taken the series with the Giants. What does game 3 hold for the Mariners? And what can we really talk about with this team right now? As well as some interesting things happening within the division and also maybe reuniting with an old friend. Comments, questions, concerns. This is episode 15 of the Hit It Here podcast. I am here with Joe. Joe, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm feeling really good about, 4-game win streak. You brought it up while I was there also. Just want to say it was a pleasure meeting as many of you guys as that we did. It was awesome. If you guys are listening, Eric didn't interview you, so don't worry about it. Just, know that we know what you know, okay? Good. Great to meet some people. It was fun being up at T-Mobile. You brought it up when I was there that the first game I went to last year, started the win streak. And my first game was the second game against the Rays, where they won 8-3, and they haven't lost since. So, you're welcome, Mariners fans. All me.
It's true. Yeah,
All
I
me.
mean, listen, statistics say that it is true. When Joe is here, and for like the 2 weeks after he's here, the Mariners don't lose. Could the Mariners be going on a big winning streak after Joe showed up? Who knows? At this point, they might kind of need it. But with that being said, let's talk a little bit about those last couple of games against the Rays. What did you see out of, I guess, the Mariners' offense? And obviously, a tough start for Castillo, but the two games you were up here, what did you see out of their offense?
Lots and lots of resiliency, just willing to fight, not kind of giving up, putting their head down and tail between their legs. That was Friday night's game. The awful, Bryce Miller exits the game and then it all implodes upon itself. But yeah, lots of just fight, really great at bats, working great counts, making solid contact and not really missing the opportunity to strike. There are a lot of times this season where we've gotten those bases loaded. We've gotten runners in scoring position with little to, maybe one out. And we haven't capitalized, but they were capitalizing in that second and third game against the Rays. It's closer in the third game. We, like you said, Castillo kind of was getting hit around a little bit, but there were some defensive mishaps and whatnot. But the win is what matters. And I think continuing that into the Giant series, their offense is still looking good.
Yeah, and I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I think they've scored 6 runs in both games thus far against the Giants off of Logan Webb, of course, who honestly was really, really good. Of course, a lot of those runs came against Oval, that
Yeah.
big ninth inning for the Mariners, which was really cool to see because it's been a long time since we have seen the Mariners really, I guess, show that much fight in like the ninth inning of a game. Usually they score a few early and then they're just stagnant the rest of the game
Yeah.
this year. And so it was really cool to see, especially off of an all-star caliber pitcher like Doval, for the Mariners to come through like that. And then game 2, of course, the Mariners were up early. They put 3 runs up in the first 3 innings, and Logan Gilbert was dominant. What do you think about Logan's complete game?
Very, very exciting. It's the first one since what, 2019?
19, I think.
I
You
think,
say Kikuchi.
yeah. So, I think we've just been kind of waiting for a moment for a pitcher like this. And we got so spoiled with it when Felix was around, right? You know, and now that we've got this new era of really, really great starting pitching, this isn't going to be the last for Logan Gilbert. It might not even be the last this season with guys like Castillo and Kirby around. And I doubt they, let the reins loose on Miller when he returns, or even Brian Wu. But there's so much young talent that complete game shutouts, I don't want to say get used to it, but I'm not going to be surprised if we see some more. I mean, Kirby's already had a complete game. It was 8 innings against the Phillies, but, we couldn't muster the offense. He lost 1-0. But still, there's lots to like about it. I was worried about I missed the beginning of the game, but he only had like one strikeout through like 3 innings. And not to say that Logan has to be a strikeout guy, because he's really only developed a more strikeout repertoire this year with the splitter and whatnot. But those numbers eventually kind of got back up, and whether or not the Giants were just kind of missing balls and they were hitting it at guys. But the beginning of the start, I was like, maybe Logan's not missing bats like he should be, but it ended up working out perfectly because, well, the rest of the game happened the way it did.
Yeah, and Logan has, or I'm sorry, not Logan. The Giants have the second highest strikeout rate in all of baseball, just ahead of the Mariners and behind the Minnesota Twins.
Really?
So, yeah, apparently that's what they said during the broadcast. So
Huh.
the Giants strike out a lot.
A
They
lot.
swing a lot, which I think kind of went to show with, like, for example, when Logan had that 3 pitch inning, 3 pitches, 3 outs, they were swinging first pitch, obviously,
Aggressive, sure.
and they were aggressive, but they weren't putting hard contact on it. I think that has, again, another thing they mentioned during the broadcast was that Logan is relying more on his secondary pitches more so than his fastball this season. He still has the fastball. Obviously, he can touch 98 miles an hour,
Hmm.
but he's throwing his fastball a lot less this year. And while he's been hit around a little bit, obviously it seems like he's been working on things this year. And I think that, with the splitter, that is a big addition for him. And honestly, that splitter has been really good for him.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the culmination, I think, of everything he put together this year with all of his off-speed pitches, including that splitter. And I think he ended with 7 strikeouts, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
9 innings, 5 hits,
And
7 strikeouts.
right, and against an ultra aggressive team like the Giants, he was able to get a lot of weak contact early. And there were a few balls that were hit pretty hard, but nothing really against Logan. I think he only gave up 5 hits in the end, and it was
Mhm.
needed, especially after how the bullpen had been taxed the past few games. Obviously, Paul Sewald had gone 3 days in a row. You and I talked about how what the hell is Scott doing bringing in Paul for the third day in a row up by 4, and then he gave up a 3-run home run, and it was just like even worse.
Yeah.
But that kind of brings us to game 3, today's game against the San Francisco Giants. The bullpen's now rested, and Tommy Milone is the announced starter versus Alex Cobb. So what do you think we need to get out of Tommy Milone, and what do we need to see out of this Mariners offense today?
I mean, rip our boy Darren McCacken first and foremost.
Yeah.
Just,
Sorry, Jay
just,
Dara.
just absolutely slighted with the roster move. But yeah, I mean, I sent out the tweet that was saying basically, what do we need? What would be ideal for Darren McCacken starting in Game 3? And now I'm the fool because it's Tommy Milone. I think something similar. What I had aligned when I was making that is, 4 to 5 innings of less than like 3 or 4 runs, because it looks like the Mariners are able to put up some runs, and albeit they struck out like 12 times against Logan Webb, and Webb's a great pitcher. They got to Keaton Wynn, who is not Logan Webb nor Alex Cobb. So would they be able to fight back against a guy like Alex Cobb? I think they can with what they've shown in the last couple of days. I mean, got the glass now early. They were able to get Taj Bradley out of there in the Rays series. So if Tommy Malone's able to go out there and just give us 4 or 5 solid innings where we're still within the fight, that's kind of what I'm looking at, because the bullpen, like you're saying, is going to be at max utility.
Yeah, and Malone, like you said, 4 or 5 innings out of him would be perfect. And then, of course, you have the All-Star game coming up. You have the All-Star break. So these guys, they're probably running on fumes right now. If you'll be able to get them, 4 or 5 days of rest here coming up. So if I would say bullpen full capacity today against the Giants, but Alex Cobb is no slouch. He's been really good this year.
Mm-hmm.
But the Mariners offense really does look like it's turned a corner over the past week. I hear you in the comments saying, "Oh, the Mariners offense figured it out." Haha, that's rich. Suck it. All right. The Mariners offense has looked a lot better. Obviously, Mike Ford on his birthday, by the way, nearly hit for the cycle. I really wish he would have went for the triple. That big
Yeah.
man lumbering around second base be hilarious.
I know. I mean, you play on the bad throw and just hope the scorer gives you a triple.
Yeah.
It's a birthday
So
present, right? You got to give him the triple.
the Mariners could very well today sweep a Giants team that is really struggling right now. And they've been hot, don't get me wrong, but slowly but surely they're kind of going back to, I think, where most people thought they would be, is behind the Dodgers and the Padres, although I definitely had them above the Diamondbacks, but nonetheless. I think that going into this third game, even if the Mariners do drop this third game, this is a win of a start to the road trip, and then you go on to face Houston, and Houston's actually had a lot of trouble recently keeping guys healthy.
Yeah.
Obviously, Yordan Alvarez is out, and now Altuve is getting tests done. Is there a chance that the Mariners could be catching up in this division just through attrition and through the injuries?
I definitely think it's one of those things where the pendulum is now swinging in our favor. The balance equilibrium, where more marbles are getting on our side, so we're kind of starting to weigh down the rest of the competition, if that makes sense. We're getting guys going at the right time where other teams might be slowing down at the wrong time for them, but ironically the right time for us. And talking about injuries, we've already kind of had the injury bugaboo hit us early in the year. Obviously, Robbie Ray being out, and then trying to fill out around the 5th starter, Marco, and then now, Bryce Miller, which is the reason why Tommy Malone's starting. So I think we've kind of already established ourselves with where the injuries already hurt us, and we're kind of catching the momentum, whereas other teams are starting to get hit off track. So I totally agree. I think, like you're saying, like the attrition, right, is just the natural balance of baseball, where you're not going to be hot the entire year, usually. And the Astros, I think, are a good example of that. They haven't been, their normal Houston Astros selves, but talking about slowing down every once in a while, this might be a moment where they might be stopped at a station and we can blow right past them for a sec.
Yeah, and of course, the Los Angeles Angels of Disneyland. Mike Trout just went on the injured list with a hamate fracture, which was such a weird play, by the way. I don't know if you
Yeah.
saw it. Did you see him like take that swing and grimace?
Yes.
And
Grimace.
grimace shake? And Shohei, of course, came out of his start against the Padres.
Hmm.
And then Anthony Rendon also came out fouling a ball off of himself. Sounds like Rendon had a shin contusion,
Yep.
and Shohei had what
It's
did he
just
have?
a
A blister?
it's just a blister. I mean, he also got pretty torched today. 5 innings, I think 7 hits, 5 earned, or might be 7 earned. I can't remember. But yeah, just I mean, it's a Padres team that has been scuffling, but it's a Padres team that is filled with talent that just happened to turn it on against Shohei today or yesterday. And yeah, I mean, talking about the war of attrition against injuries, the Angels have had their fair share, I think, of injuries, with Urshela and Rendon. That, the infield is looking a little thin, and some guys may not have worked out for him. I don't think Jared Walsh is having necessarily a great year. So, yeah, I think they're trying to figure out where they're at in terms of filling out the rest of their offense and their lineup. And when you lose a guy like Mike Trout, it's not going to be easy. And then also, Shohei Ohtani, if this blister is lingering, could be similar to Bryce Miller, where Bryce Miller is out after the All-Star break. He might just miss 1 or 2 starts. Shohei misses 1 or 2 starts, but you're also going to miss that bat. I'm sure you can play through a blister swinging a bat. But, that's going to be huge for the Angels if they're missing a guy like Ohtani for even a series.
Yeah, and the final member of the American League West that we need to really worry about is the Texas Rangers, of course, leading the division. They're 4-6 in their last 10, and offensively, they just have kind of stalled out a little bit. Their pitching isn't as good as it has been. Don't get me wrong; they've still been good,
Mm-hmm.
but it's good to see that we all knew that the Rangers weren't that good, right? We knew that their offense, they had a good offense. Don't get me wrong, but they did not have the 1927 Yankees murderers row offense,
Sure.
and everything, like you said, is starting to even out a little bit, the equilibrium. And for the Mariners, they're playing really good ball right now against some pretty dang decent teams, especially after dropping 2 of 3 to the Washington Nationals, fake
Yeah.
Washington. And it's starting to come to a point right at the trade deadline where the Mariners could be getting into talks for maybe acquiring some guys for the next few years. Again, they're just now back at 500. I don't want to count our chickens before the eggs hatch here because, of course, there's still so much time
Yeah.
until the trade deadline. But with the All-Star break coming up, this is our last podcast before the All-Star game and the All-Star break. By the way, I'll be there. Say hey and what's up.
Is
If you
it?
guys are either at the Play Ballpark, yeah,
When's
it's
the
the
All-Star
last.
game?
The All-Star game is on next Tuesday.
Dang.
Uh-huh.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
So I don't even know if I'll be able to record the podcast next week. We'll see.
Solo Hit It Here podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
But speaking of the All-Star game, of course, Luis Castillo was the only member for the Mariners, but that has now changed as Julio Rodriguez and George Kerber have both been added to the All-Star team roster. What do you think about that for the Mariners, Joe?
Very, very excited. We were, a little sad. We were at the game when the announcements were happening, and it's just Luis Castillo, the Mariners All-Star, and it's like, oh, that's it. And, have they necessarily earned more spots? Not fully, because you look at the offense and there's not really a standout guy. But within the rotation and in the bullpen, I really felt both of us kind of agreed that George Kirby and Paul Sewald definitely should have been guys that probably on the fringe. And that just goes to show with George Kirby being announced as an addition instead of, I thought it was Shane McClanahan, but I saw something else where it said it was instead of Framber. I'm not sure who he's replacing at this point in time.
It was McClanahan. Yeah, Kirby replaced McClanahan, and
Uh-huh.
Julio replaced Alvarez.
Yes, there was something else I saw later where it was another person was replacing McClanahan instead. I can't remember who.
Mm.
Regardless, they're both in, and that's what counts. George, very, very deserving. I think he's been better than Castillo this year, and I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong. That he was behind Gilbert still going into this year. No, Kirby's the two, without a doubt in my mind right now, even after this complete game. And I think that just kind of goes to show like his consistency and he walked 2 in that start against the Rays, which is insane because he never does that. George Kirby, he's just been excellent all year. And Julio being added, it's a great addition because, he is the face of our franchise. He is one of the few faces of the MLB that is universally recognized, I think, at this point. And it's just, I don't know. We had a comment last week that was saying, I started watching because of Julio Rodriguez, and this dude he's from Argentina, which is just crazy. Like it's so global at this point, and it's really, really awesome. I saw some people saying that, maybe he doesn't deserve it. It's only because it's Seattle. His offensive numbers, yeah, they're not off the charts, but it's Julio, and he's also playing a really great defensive center field, so I'm happy about both, without
Yeah,
a
and
doubt.
I don't necessarily disagree with people that say that Julio didn't deserve it. I mean, he's been fine, don't get me wrong,
Sure.
but like you said, he is one of the faces of baseball, and to not have him in the All-Star game is a shame.
Yeah.
Like, he is so good for baseball. He's already going to be in the home run derby as it is. You may as well just put him in the All-Star game, especially when it's in Seattle.
Yeah.
That'd be like saying, "Oh, Mike Trout not in the All-Star game this year." It's like every single year you just expect to see like the Mike Trouts, the Shohei Otanis, the Julios of baseball
Yeah.
be in that All-Star game. And even if there were people that were more deserving, and I do agree that there were players that were more deserving, it means so much more to the city of Seattle that and baseball as a whole, in my opinion, that Julio made it instead of I don't even have like Harrison Bader or something. I don't know
I
if
I've
Harrison Bader's even been worthy, but
I've got the replacement that people wanted is
mhm.
Masataka Yoshida. If say the All-Star game is in Boston instead of Seattle, without a doubt in my mind, Yoshida would be there
Yeah.
instead of Julio replacing Yordan Alvarez. So I think don't want to say that they're being shills and bootlickers to Seattle, but like kind of understand where they're coming from as far as representation for the city and like what it means for Seattle in terms of the MLB.
Yeah, and Yoshida is probably more deserving in my opinion than Julio.
Sure,
And
sure.
like you said, it's a little bit of hometown favoritism because in my opinion, if you were in Seattle for the All-Star game and the only All-Star you have was Luis Castillo, that's really a bummer. Like you're like, "Oh, woo, I'm going to go see the Mariners play," and you're watching the Blue Jays and the Rangers take on the Braves in the
Sure.
All-Star game.
And
It's
then
like,
Castillo comes in and pitches the fourth inning, and
yeah,
then he's
and like
done.
who cares? Yeah.
And like, will Julio see? He'll probably see like an at bat or two, but he's not going to start.
Mhm.
And will we even see George Kirby in the game? I'm not sure. How
Yeah.
it'll work because there's so many guys to fit into 9 innings of baseball that some guys just don't make it onto the field. So I just think also I don't know, the representation is nice though, very very good.
So let's talk a little bit about the one of the first trades the Mariners have made this season thus far, and that is trading Chris Flexen and Trevor Gott to the Mets for a guy. He's just I don't he's a guy.
John Stanton, you're the worst person on planet Earth. How dare you?
How
People were reacting like it was just this terrible, terrible thing. This is not the trade to be mad at, in my opinion.
Mhm.
This is not the one to go up in arms about. Sure, does it look bad in terms of Mariners ownership that they're so hard pressed to get rid of Flexen and Gott's salary? Because the big thing there is just they wanted to get rid of, $4.5 million essentially. Why does that matter to you that much? They're both guys that weren't going to get used. Flexen was never going to be used again. Gott has been shaky since the first month of the year. Could he come back and figure it out and be a bit better? Sure. Did he have a little bit of control left? Sure. They're not being used regardless. Why does it matter that much? And Zach Muckenhern, or however the hell you pronounce his last name, Muckenhern, I don't know. I think like 30 and a third innings pitched in AAA this year with like less than 1 ERA. Why not just give it a try? See if the lab can turn him into Gabe Spire because he's a lefty. Why not? I mean, we don't necessarily need lefty specialists. It's not really a thing that exists necessarily, but the opportunity of him being more useful than Flexen and Gott, I'm not upset. This is not the trade to be upset at.
the the Mariners pitching lab, like you said, why would we not think that they would be able to turn Muckenhern into something bigger than some sort of random middle reliever?
Sure.
Obviously, we've seen it with, like you said, Spire and Seawald, et cetera, et cetera. And with Trevor Gott and Chris Flexen obviously had already been designated for assignment. We were under the impression that Flexen was gone, you were getting nothing for him.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, you eat that $4 million salary, call it a day. And then Trevor Gott, I mean, he's someone who probably would have been off of this team in the next couple of weeks anyway if he kept performing the way that he was.
Yeah.
The big free agent signing just for the Mariners in 2022. Who cares? Who cares? Chris Flexen got traded, which we all expected. He immediately got DFA'd by the New York Mets.
Just go get him
Back
again.
up. And if we were to pick him up, Joe, go ahead. Read the tweet. Go on. I want to hear it.
Oh, you want to hear the tweet?
I want to hear the tweet. Yeah, if you can just put it out there into the the Hit It Here podcast verse really quick and talk about reacquiring Chris Flexen for me really quick and what the Mariners should do with that going.
Well, longtime listener Mariners Andy on Twitter, shout out to you for responding to us on there, says we got to just go get Flexen from waivers, and then we start to cook. You got to trade Flexen to the Angels for Ohtani. That blister, it's going to devalue him so much that they're willing to take it at this point, right? And then you extend Ohtani 10 years for $10 million. $1 million, because that's the salary that Trevor Gott received in the offseason. So, you could probably play around with the money that we just saved with this trade there. And then he's going to shut up and listen. So, Andy, thank you. I appreciate that.
Andy, that was a good tweet. I'm not gonna lie. I appreciate that tweet, Andy. I like the idea. I like where your head's at.
Exactly. And if you guys have other things like this that you just kind of want to put out there into the Hit It Here podcast universe, comment on the videos, respond to us on Twitter, whatever. We'll get you in there.
And I think that, is there a real possibility the Mariners go back and re-sign Chris Flexen now at the minor league minimum or major league minimum instead of, $4 million a year? I don't see why not. If he's willing to come back and be in the minor leagues, of course he would have just accepted his outright, whatever.
Yeah.
You get the point. But the Mets are now paying $4 million to him and the $500,000 that Trevor Gott was going to get. The Mariners are just off the hook for that money and they got an asset in return instead of just cutting Flexen and cutting Gott, because that's what's going to happen anyway. So the fact they were able to get something in return, Muck and Hearn more than likely is nothing. More often than not, guys in AAA turn out to just be,
Oh well.
But with that being said, you have that $4.5 million. It's more about what you do with that money now. Are the Mariners going to reinvest it elsewhere? Maybe an extension to Tom Murphy, maybe going out and making a trade of some kind. Who knows?
Yeah.
There is a free agent that the Mariners could be going after. Why don't you tell us a little bit, Joe, about Nelson Cruz?
Boomstick baby, unfortunately, but fortunately for us that are hopeful out there, was DFA'd from the San Diego Padres. He was, signed in the offseason. We were, pounding our drum, bring Nelly here because, we didn't really know what the DH spot was going to look like. Now that Mike Ford has kind of surged into that spot, where does Nelly necessarily fit in this roster? The only thing I can think of that would make sense is to get Dylan Moore some time in AAA to get some ABs, because we don't necessarily absolutely need his positional flexibility, I think, at the moment. You've got 4 outfielders in, the main starters, and then AJ Pollock. You've got guys that can play all around the infield because Mike Ford can give Ty France a day off. You've got the backup catcher, and then Cabby can play the rest of the infield. Should, him and Wong be back and forth. So Moore's role on this team, it's not overly abundant right now. And if we're talking about what about a pinch runner, Caballero is a pinch runner right now. I don't care. If he's not starting the game, he is your pinch runner and he's causing chaos, because that is what started the rally in the 9th to, really put the Giants under. So you go out, you get Nelson Cruz, and you send Dylan Moore down to AAA. Let him get some ABs, because, he has options. Yeah?
Probably.
I would hope Dylan Moore has options. If not, that's a caveat.
Well, maybe not, because he was signed to a major league contract. I don't know. We'll figure that out later. But nonetheless, I agree. I agree with what you're saying. I think Nelson Cruz still could help a Major League Baseball team. And he had one bad month thus far in 2023. And for the Mariners, he could add that veteran presence. I think a similar veteran presence to what we got with Carlos Santana in 2022. Thus far in 2023, in May, Nelly hit 128 and 39 ABs. But in April, he hit 303. In June, he hit 286. And thus far in July, he's hitting 200. Doesn't matter. He has 5 home runs on the year. Again, he could be a DH for you and kind of swap back and forth with Mike Ford. Mike Ford's been good. Don't get me wrong. And maybe there's a little bit of bias here that I just want Nelson Cruz back in the Mariners uniform because I love the guy. He is one of my favorite Mariners of all time. And I think that if you need to send down Dylan Moore, that's the move to do it, because he looks just lost right now at the plate. And that doesn't mean that AJ Pollock shouldn't get more at bats. In my opinion, AJ Pollock should be starting a little bit more, and Jared Kelenic should be riding the bench a little bit more right now, because AJ Pollock just does not have the at bats this year to really prove is he worth it or not. And the Mariners need to figure that out soon before the trade deadline. Otherwise, he's just going to be rotting away on this roster.
I think the original plan for the lineup in Game 2 was to have Ty DH. Or maybe not DH, maybe play first.
He was playing first, yeah.
Yeah, so...
Mike Ford DH.
Okay, but sure. Regardless, Ty was in there, and Jared was getting a day off. And then, obviously, late change, Ty is no longer in there in Game 2. If he's ready to go in Game 3, I don't see why not Pollock to be starting and then let Jared get a day off, because Pollock hit a home run, regularly scheduled AJ Pollock success when you least expect it, and who knows, maybe a day off for Jared could just do him a little bit of wonders there.
Yeah, because Jared's been quite bad lately, and his attitude has started to kind of go down along with his production. Whether or not those two things correlate, I'm just saying. But maybe it back to the original premise of the question, Nelson Cruz. Okay. The Mariners could make a trade for him. They could just, obviously he was designated for assignment, and that means the Padres have 10 days to either cut or trade him.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume that Nelly is going to go somewhere. Because
Yeah.
it's Nelson Cruz. He's old. He's 43 years old. His birthday was like 2 days ago, and then the Padres DFA'd him today or
L
yesterday.
L
So like L, you can't spell Padres without L. There's an L in there
AJ
somewhere.
Preller. You could have gone with AJ Preller.
Oh, AJ Preller. True.
Sure.
True. So I would love to see him back in a Mariners uniform. He's technically needs to play for 4 years to be eligible for the Mariners Hall of Fame. I think he is more than deserving to be in the Mariners Hall of Fame. So I don't know. Let's just go get Nelly.
The options thing does work out. According to Fangraphs, Dylan Moore has 3 minor league options left. So go out and get Nelly and then just option Dylan Moore. Like, just give him some time to get back in the swing of things. It's the same reason why Sam Haggerty went down. Wasn't looking like a major league ball player at that point. Give him some reps. What we could send to the Padres, I mean, they're not going to be asking for a lot.
Yeah.
Send them Zach Muckenhern or whatever. Just flip that again real quick. Just give them something, because I think bringing Nelly back would be just an overall immaculate dub for the Mariners in general.
Mm-hmm. And having somebody like Nelson Cruz in this lineup, again, it adds some power to the lineup, of course,
Sure.
but it's the veteran leadership. We saw it with Carlos Santana, someone who wasn't actually that good for the Mariners, but he brought the veteran leadership and he was clutch when it counted. Nelly could very easily be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, Nelson Cruz strikes out a lot, just like the rest of this entire lineup.
Sure.
Adding him in that situation, who knows? Is there anything left in Nelly's tank? Who knows? But it doesn't hurt to try. And if it doesn't work out, at least give him a good few weeks. Say, hey, you can DH, kind of platoon with Mike Ford over there, DH a little bit. Doesn't work out, so be it. But if it does, you've got yourself a great middle of the order bat that has performed for you and for other teams for the last 10 years.
Yeah. And, even if it's not this big, illustrious role that people may envision for him, if it's just like a pinch hit home run every once in a while, I'm down. If it's, a spot start where he gets a, little double, a little cheeky RBI double, everyone, like, it's, we're not expecting 2016 boomstick to come back, right? We're not expecting 40 homers, 100 RBIs. We're just, you're talking about the veteran presence and the occasional boom, and I'll be happy.
So the Mariners finish up this series with the San Francisco Giants today. Again, Alex Cobb on the mound versus Tommy Malone. Then they are on to face the Houston Astros before wrapping up the first half of the season and going into the All-Star break. Make sure you guys subscribe to Mariner Mojo, because we're going to be putting up a lot of stuff with the All-Star break. I'm going to be there all weekend long. We're going to be doing a lot of cool stuff. Make sure you subscribe for that. Appreciate you guys watching this episode 15 of the Hit It Here podcast. And we'll talk to you next time. Go Mariners.